All right, the clock is going. It says
There's
we're live.
the little live thing
The
is
little
up.
live thing is true. It must be true. Hey, last we talked, you were about to go do some recording. How'd it go?
Well, good and bad. I mean, we got vocals done for 2 songs, and it's interesting. Down in the basement that I rent, it's like a 1950s. Um, it was the original planning department for the city of Bremerton. And so it's got
No
men's and
kidding.
women's room. Yeah. And the women's room has this outer room that's got kind of these cubby lockers in it and stuff and a mirror.
Mm-hmm.
And we made that our vocal isolation booth. So we're recording all the vocals in the women's room, which is a cool story. But we got vocals done for a couple of songs and finished them off. And then we tried to record another scratch tune, and I started having computer problems. I mean, computers and I have always had this difficult relationship, and last night it reared up. So we, said, okay, well, I'll fix it later. That's kind of where it landed.
Got it. Got it. Well, that must have made you happy.
No, it makes me really mad. It does. I hate computers.
Hey, before we get going into the 0 days and other things we're going to talk about, a reminder for everybody, it is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and so we're doing free security awareness training every Friday. I'll put the link in the chat. And Mike, you're doing a Department of Homeland Security cyber awareness thing as well, right?
I am.
You're the honored guest.
I don't know how true that is. But DHS is doing a webinar on a different topic each week in October. And week 3 is workforce development. So I'll be on a panel representing the Pisces Project and, talking about how to get into cyber roles more broadly. It's Tuesday the 19th at 10 o'clock in the morning. Do you have the link for that one? Because anyone can attend. It's open to the public. So if you're interested in that, especially, if you're interested in getting into this business, there's going to be some good tips there. There's some, what I will say are DHS muckety mucks that are going to be there with me. So.
Yeah, the link you sent me to that one, my computer is scanning before I can put it in the chat.
As well it should.
As well it should. I'll throw it in the chat after it finishes scanning.
That's because we made your computer do that.
Risky business. Hey, one thing before we get to the news, one of our coworkers likes to say Hamilton is always right. A few weeks ago on this chat, you said you talked about hacktivists, and guess what?
Yeah.
Guess what? Now, like front page of the Washington Post, hacktivists, right?
Yep. That actually interesting article. I wasn't going to talk about that this week, but since you brought it up, they're going. Corporations that fund, political crazies, for example. Kind of these right-wing groups that are violent. Authoritarian governments all over the place, and it's not just anonymous. There is a whole bunch of these. LulzSec, Unicorn Riot, Distributed Denial of Secrets, Verkada in Sweden. I mean, there's a bunch of these.
It's really, and it's making.
You're right. I predicted this. You're right. But unfortunately, the other thing that I predicted is that next election time, there's going to be a whole lot of, cyber chicanery going on and, ransomware trying to flatten counties to make it so that the vote can't be trusted. It's going to get real animated. I expected that last election. I really expect it this time.
That doesn't make me feel good. But I'm sure the next thing you tell us, Will, what's going on in the news this week?
Oh, it's another boring week. Let's see. Patches just came out from Microsoft. Reboot now. I've already rebooted another computer because it had a little orange dot there. I'm expecting my orange dot here soon. VMware ESXi servers are being hit with what's called rapidly acting Python scripts that encrypt and extort. So, it's ransomware against your virtual systems. CISA warns that the Fin12 ransomware gang, which goes specifically after hospitals, I think 20% of the victims are in the health sector. And specifically,
it makes me.
Look. These guys are going to get a whooping. It's coming. In fact, we should talk about that here in a minute. But this gang goes after specifically high revenue operations, right? So a little threat intel there to know whether or not you're in their target list. They're going after what was reported was over 300 million in revenue. There are competing bills in Congress about this mandatory reporting. And just like we discussed here, there's some consternation about the fact that reported information is not being insulated from public disclosure. Company names can be redacted, right? So CISA receives all these reports, and then they have to give a report to Congress. That report cannot be insulated from FOIA requests, right? So, while company names might not appear there, there's still a bunch of juicy information, and people are concerned about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I have specific feelings about FOIA as a former journalist.
Yeah, I bet.
I don't think I doubt you and I see eye to eye, but what's the private sector saying about this? Like, I understand some big corporations and business associations have been supportive.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's true, but this issue about using FOIA to find out details of private sector critical infrastructure is going to be sticky. It's a solvable problem, and how we did it in Washington State is actually a model. The exemptions for public disclosure were broadened in, I think, 2014 to include anything that discloses vulnerabilities in infrastructure, which has pretty broad definition. So you can withhold things like network maps, details of incidents, where the fiber is laid, stuff like that.
Well, I mean, that makes sense. And we did that in Washington?
Yeah. That was when I was working with the state and the office of the CIO. That was one of the first things that the then new CIO Michael Cockrell did, and that was something that he held up as a huge success. During his honeymoon period, he was right. That was a smart thing to do.
It's funny, and at the time, I was on the other side of that. I'm sure, saying more open government.
There's things we can't tell you, Jake.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, that's for real.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get that. But if anyone wants to jump into a big discussion of open government and FOIAs, like, I'm always willing. Mike and I
I've used it myself.
Mm-hmm. Hey, there was a lot of news this week about the federal government's efforts to use public policy to address ransomware criminals.
Mm-hmm.
What's new this week? I mean, there was a motion that I read about. What are the specifics there?
The federal government is starting a lot of things. They're starting to use civil lawsuits. Well, they're threatening civil lawsuits against government contractors that fail to properly disclose breaches to the government. Mm-hmm. They're very serious about this because of the SolarWinds, Kaseya, other third-party or supply chain incidents. The Treasury Department also got real about the crypto exchange sanctions. For those exchanges that are, processing ransomware payments, and has apparently extended the OFAC rules. Remember, the OFAC rules say you can't make a payment to this country because we have them on a bad list. Now the crypto exchanges are coming under the OFAC rules. So you can't pay through any of those exchanges. It's not a prohibition on payment, but there's a penalty for doing it, which makes it the same as a prohibition. Honestly, I don't think this one's going to play well with the private sector either.
No, I mean, in some ways, it seems like the administration is kind of stepping on a rake here, making these policy changes, and then there's going to be blowback. I mean, the big news I saw this week is that President Biden convened a summit with a number of other countries to discuss like a framework for solutions that everybody can get behind. That seems smart.
It does, but the fact that China and Russia were not invited sends a message in and of itself. I contributed to a piece that came out yesterday about that message, we see you. So, that's one track. We can all agree to not use crypto exchanges that process ransom payments. We can all agree to arrest individuals that have been identified as operators and affiliates. And there's a lot of ways that if we work together, we'll push them all into a corner and the problem will become much more tractable, right? But the other track is the one that General Nakasone talked about when he said that Cybercom was going to surge toward the adversary, okay? That's some scary talk, intentionally. And it's being backed up by more and more calls by lawmakers for definitive cyber deterrence policy, right? We're ticked, man. And, they keep saying,
It does seem like it's time to do something. I mean, the way I read it is that legislators are saying some of the things that you say. Back to everybody listens to Mike, and Mike was right the first time around. It's fine to tell everyone to secure their systems and align with the NIST framework and do all the things, but what we're missing and what's making us vulnerable is we don't seem to be taking action.
Exactly. I think the time is going to come when you and I are talking about things that are much closer to war than crime. And I think that's coming soon. You see what China's doing around Taiwan, right? Now we know more about North Korean recruiting and training of their cyber operators and how they're engaged in huge amounts of crime globally. North Korea would not hesitate to knock down infrastructure, and support from China would not be out of the question for, plausible deniability. It's a strategic, interest of China, but they're going to use, North Korea to do it.
That's not a happy thought. But I mean, and Iran is part of this whole thing as well. We haven't even mentioned Iran.
Yeah, well, they use, those cutouts too. And the news this week talks about just that. The Iranians use Hezbollah and Hamas as proxies, and they've targeted industrial control systems at major manufacturers. They've stolen something like $3.5 billion in intellectual property. So, we all need to keep in mind that the skill sets of our adversaries have come way up in the last 5 years or so. And this is getting dangerous. It's all just news till it hits you at the scale of your life. A Pentagon software chief, I don't even know what that means, resigned recently, I think this week or last week, specifically, well, what he said was specifically because we have no chance against China over the next 10 to 15 years. They're eating our lunch in AI and, cyber offensive, capabilities, things like that.
I don't know, when somebody resigns and says something that grandiose.
Yeah, I know.
I'm always like,
I know.
Really? I don't know.
What's a software chief? What the hell is that?
What is a software chief? If anybody can tell us, let us know. But by the way, speaking of Iran, their big New York Times article this morning about how, with Lebanon's financial problems, that, now Iran is getting a better foothold in Lebanon because they have to buy their gas from somewhere, and Iran is helping giving them gas, which puts Lebanon in a collision course with the U.S. because of sanctions, and just adds, more clout for Iran.
Yeah.
Anyway, none of that makes me especially.
The chess pieces are getting moved around right now, and not in a good way.
All right. I think it's time for some joy. This is the part where there's a kicker. There's something at the end. One time it was digital chastity belts. That was actually your best one. What do you got, Mike?
All right. The Navy's has a warships page on Facebook. Okay. And the Navy's warships page was hacked. And not only was it hacked, it was used to stream Age of Empires gaming, which is not just a clever hack. It's completely on brand for the Navy. So, this went on for about 4 hours till it got stopped. And I'm sure that this is now part of the permanent lore of the sea.
Of things that are permanent lore of the sea, this feels small, but yeah.
I thought it was funny. I mean, that's a really clever hack.
Yeah. Hey, you know what I just realized for Halloween? You should totally be a pirate. I can see you with a parrot on your shoulder. And
no.
What are you going to be for Halloween? Have you figured it out?
Asleep.
There is no joy in Mudville, is there?
No.
Right.
I mean, I stopped enjoying Halloween about the time I was, 10.
I had no idea.
No, my daughter, she'll be into it. I've seeded all that to,
This is very depressing. I don't know that we can be friends anymore. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Now that we've found out this disturbing news about Mike Hamilton, we can leave.
Hit me up at Hanukkah. I'll do better.
Hanukkah's Thanksgiving weekend.
I know,
year,
yeah.
So get ready soon. All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.